Una vez más, muy buenas tardes a cada uno de ustedes. En nombre de FISA, parte del grupo GL Events, les damos la más cordial bienvenida a este que es el cuarto panel de la segunda jornada del Congreso Internacional sobre la industria del hidrógeno verde en este HyVolution 2023 que hemos iniciado en el día de ayer paralelamente a la exhibición que está en las afueras de este salón. Vamos a dar paso al siguiente panel que se llama La cadena de valor del hidrógeno Chile y Europa, cuáles son los próximos pasos. Y la dinámica va a ser la siguiente. Los 4 integrantes del panel van a hacer primero una presentación de aproximadamente 10 minutos y luego van a dar paso a la discusión. Dicho eso, dejo en primer término con ustedes a quien va a ser también el moderador de este panel, al señor Clemens Müller-Falcke, que es socio de McKinsey & Company, líder de sustentabilidad en Hispanoamérica, McKinsey & Company, a quien recibimos con un gran aplauso.
Hello everyone, great to see you all here. So let's talk about the hydrogen value chain, Chile-Europe, especially in light of the EU delegated acts. Let's see if this works. Well, let's go. So globally, we see the hydrogen value chain with a lot of momentum. We are tracking more than 1,000 large-scale projects across the world. They'll sum up to, by now, more than 38 million, and now it went too far by itself. Let's go one back. Sum up to more than 38 million tons of announced clean hydrogen production by 2030. If you look at the distribution of this, there's a focus obviously in Europe, but we also see a lot of projects in North America, in Asia, Australia, and here in Latin America, and especially in Chile. There are some hurdles remaining, especially two. The first one is the lack of stable long-term offtake agreements, and the second one is that we've actually seen an increase in expected production cost due to the increase in material cost and the increase in execution cost. Still, we've seen a lot of acceleration in the value chain. Just over the last 18 months, we've seen a doubling of announcements in projects. So now announced projects sum up to an expected investment of more than $300 billion by 2030. About a little more than half of these projects are in feasibility stage or more advanced. This acceleration of projects is driven to a large degree by regulation. And in regulation, we see that there are 3 basic types of policies globally. First one is production subsidies. For example, in the US with the IRA, we see a focus on that. Second one is direct capex subsidies as the industry is scaling up. The third one is then demand regulation, so quotas, CO2 taxes, etc., which is especially what Europe is focusing on. So let's look at that in a bit more detail with the 2 EU delegated acts. Basically, what they do is they define of what is going to count, what counts as green hydrogen. There are 3 concepts that are important for us here in Chile, which is the additionality criteria, the temporal correlation, and the geographic correlation. What that means concretely for Chile is the first one, the additionality criteria. Basically, green hydrogen projects in Chile, the large-scale ones, will need to use newly built RES. That has to be built not more than 36 months before start of hydrogen production. And if you look at sort of a timeline of what these hydrogen projects need, it's basically all of this is going to be newly built. Second one then, the temporal correlation, when will need to be monthly matching until 2030 between the electricity generation and the demand. As of 2030 onwards, it will need to be hourly, even for the projects that come online before 2030. The third concept of geographic correlation requires both assets, the electricity generation and the hydrogen production, to be in the same bidding zone, which roughly means here that they need to be in a region where there is no capacity restrictions and transmission between those two. Now, but what does this mean for Chile? Well, it means that large-scale hydrogen and derivative projects will need to be off-grid, basically. The amount of electricity that they can take from the grid is very limited, but the same is also true for most of the other regions, which then in turn means that the competitiveness of the production cost here in Chile will depend to a largest degree on the capacity factors of a renewable. And we have a big advantage there, both in solar and in wind, among the best globally. So actually, this quite restrictive regulation that they are proposing and passing in Europe is going to favor us in general. We ran some numbers on this. So these here are a simulated project in the north of Chile, a large-scale project coming online, starting production in 2025. So basically something that is under construction as of today. And if you build that completely off-grid, just using solar, we expect the production cost for the green hydrogen to be maybe a little lower than $4 per kilogram of hydrogen. Now, you can take under the proposed regulation a little bit off-grid, not much, so that lowers the production cost less than 10%, so really not that much. If you look at maybe less restrictive certification schemes, like for example, Certify, you could take more electricity from the grid. So we estimate that this could bring production costs down by maybe 17%. But really a little bit bigger step would be to do a blending of wind, which can reduce the production cost and around by a fourth. So getting down to something like $3 per kilogram of hydrogen in 2025. Now, a huge opportunity, that regulation that it creates for Chile to export. The question of, is Chile ready? Well, the answer is not quite, probably. Both the private sector and the public sector have to work on this. Just to mention a few of the highlights, maybe what we believe are the most important elements here. From the private sector, we need the commitment to accelerate decarbonization here in Chile itself. Otherwise, there will be no domestic demand for green hydrogen and the derivatives. We need that for the domestic demand and the build-out of the domestic infrastructure. Second, the projects really need to play offense, and we cannot leave it to the other regions that also have a good potential to produce and export, like Australia, North Africa, etc., that are obviously also looking at the European market. We need to take the advantage of our renewable potential. And third, private sector needs to work together with the public sector on scaling up skilled labor, both manual and engineering. This is going to be a clear bottleneck if we want to achieve the numbers that are in the National Green Hydrogen Strategy. When looking at the public sector, just a few of the most important areas here. One is there probably needs to be a price on carbon to accelerate the shift in some of the heavy industries, to give it a push in the beginning, to switch to green hydrogen and derivatives. We will need an adequate regulatory framework for the infrastructure build-out. And there will need to be a lot of transmission lines, pipelines, the ports, etc. Public sector also will need to work on scaling up skilled labor together with academic institutions, together with the private sector, and together with other countries as well. And finally, probably the most important, single most important item on here, we need to have clarity on regulation and permitting, transparency, clarity on outcome and certainty on outcome of these processes, and faster processes. That doesn't mean lowering the bar, but it means getting to competitive processes in comparison to these other regions. Thanks a lot.
Agradecemos a Clemens su presentación y ahora invitamos a exponer a Mikaa Meret, profesor de Geopolítica de Hidrógeno y Antártica de la Universidad Sciences Po de Francia. Adelante, Mikaa, te recibimos con un aplauso.
Muchas gracias. Hola, damas y caballeros. Soy Mikaa, soy francés, así que me entristece hablar inglés, pero todavía no hablo español, por favor, tengan paciencia conmigo. Can we switch to English? Once again, sorry for this. So, in just 10 minutes, I have 28 slides to complement my colleague. To make sure that when we talk about the geopolitics of hydrogen and when we ask the question, is Chile ready, we have all the information to get the debate going. So basically, why do we have another hydrogen hype? It's the 5th hydrogen hype in history right now. So it's because anyone virtually can produce some hydrogen to some extent at a certain price. Chile, on that front, when we think about wind power, definitely is a very interesting country. Then, when we add solar PV or solar thermal, then once again, Chile is very interesting, once again. So that's why we're all here in this room. That's why we have HyVolution Chile, right? However, it's not that simple, definitely. So, if we want to stay under a plus 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise at the global level by 2050 or 2100, this, according to the IRENA, which is the International Renewable Energy Agency, is what we will need to deliver, or what we should aim for in the hydrogen economy if we want to stay under that threshold. As you can see, the numbers are huge. Huge, like Donald Trump huge, you know, like super huge. So indeed, going from 300 megawatts of electrolysis capacity in the world to 5,000 gigawatts, that's a huge challenge. In France, in Europe, a lot of people, a lot of engineers are saying the mountain is too high. It's impossible. What I would tell you, and what I'm thinking a lot of entrepreneurs here in the room see when they see those figures, is opportunity. Yeah, diplomats as well, right? So now, when we look at electricity, the 21,000 terawatt hour of electricity we will need to deliver on these 5,000 gigawatt-ish of electrolysis, to deliver enough hydrogen, to deliver the target goals, the climate targets we're talking about. Here, as you can see, it would mean doubling the global demand for electricity generation. That's what we're talking about. So hydrogen and electricity, whether you look at it from a power generation point of view, or a battery point of view, or a mobility point of view, or an infrastructure point of view, whatever, they go hand in hand. We will not deliver a hydrogen economy without a strong electricity economy, and vice versa. Many countries have understood this. And that's the reason why we have now a lot of hydrogen strategies, or hydrogen roadmaps, or hydrogen action plans. There's plenty of ways to call them. This is a map of all the hydrogen strategic governmental national documents published in the world as of December 2019. Before the COVID crisis. As you can see on this map, the countries in green are those that had a hydrogen document of some sort, more or less ambitious, in 2019. Only 10 of them. There were only 10. And if you wonder why I put Brazil and Argentina, it's because they had some kind of roadmaps or hydrogen laws already back in 2004 and 2005, respectively. But that doesn't mean that they acted on, that's the thing. So you have the document, but then you have to act on that document. Well, look, 2023, now, end of May, you have now 50 countries in the world that have a hydrogen strategic document at governmental level. Chile, of course, was one of the first new, so to speak, countries to publish a hydrogen strategy right after the COVID crisis in November 2020. But then a number of others definitely also came on that trend. And in blue here on that map are all the countries that are working on a strategy of some sort. So when you add the numbers, yes, these strategies are important. They're like policy to market signals that are interesting, but they don't tell us the whole story. We now have 51 countries that have a strategy, because Israel have just published theirs in June. 42 other countries are preparing one, and altogether they cover a whole bulk of the global economy, the CO2 emissions, and so on. So the policy signals are there. Hydrogen is here to stay. But now, going back to our question, is Chile ready? Well, as we've seen since yesterday, yes, there's a lot of enthusiasm. Yes, there's a lot of possibilities, but on a various aspect across the spectrum, Chile is not fully ready yet on delivering this whole thing. Does that mean that Chile is lagging behind at some point? The answer is no. Chile is not ready yet, but amongst the countries that are involved in this hydrogen economy, Chile is definitely one of the most ready, if you want, countries out there. So now the big question is, when are we going to deliver? And who can deliver? At scale, at cost, and who will offtake? Because yeah, we often say that at hydrogen conferences, like there's this chicken and egg problem between production and consumption. What I would tell you is, there's no chicken and egg thing. There's no problem. We have the chickens. We can produce the hydrogen. We have the eggs. We have the hydrogen. That's already an economy that exists. Now what we need is people to eat those eggs. That's really what we need. That's what I call the egg eaters, basically. And the thing is, when you look at the geoeconomics of this hydrogen egg eating scene, what do you have? What you realize is that China is likely to be self-sufficient in terms of producing and consuming its own hydrogen. The US, same thing. But Europe, in the meantime, not likely to be self-sufficient at all at the moment. Not France, not Germany, not even Spain. No one. Except maybe the Nordics. So basically what that means is that, well, we need to get our hydrogen from somewhere. We will get it most likely from the closest place where hydrogen can be produced in a green fashion, at cost, and at scale. So of course, North Africa, the Middle East, the European Arctic, maybe Ukraine, or even Russia, if they get back into the game. But what is certain at this point is that when you look at the literature, be it coming from McKinsey or Deloitte or whoever, what you realize is that every single time, Latin America or South America is seen as a small player altogether. That's for 2030, according to Deloitte's last report published in June. Let's look at 2050. According to Deloitte, once again, South America would definitely be, according to them, a small exporter compared to the others. Well, let me tell you straight, I completely disagree with this report. Completely. And I'm not just saying this because I'm in Chile. I said it on LinkedIn publicly to the authors of the report. My point here is that when you look at those reports, they don't tell you the whole story. What you want to see or pay attention to is where the market is today, and then act on it. If you're strong politically, if you're strong from a legal point of view, from an administrative point of view, you can act on it. But you need to be strong and you need to be coherent all across the political, economical, industrial, and even academic spectrum. You need to address 5 bottlenecks that will enable you to become a strong hydrogen economy supplier, whether for yourself, for your continent, or maybe beyond, to Europe, maybe. First bottleneck, critical metal supply, and especially the pressure on nickel. Good, Chile can respond to that. And the pressure on platinum or platinoids. Chile cannot respond to that. Here we have an issue. So here, we've got a first bottleneck. Linked to that, you have the fact that China right now is leading in all segments when it comes to critical metals for the hydrogen and batteries economy. So if you're expecting Europeans to go at full scale in this kind of business, then you need to offer them some kind of an alternative to another dependency on China. Second bottleneck, electrolyzers versus manufacturing capacity. Yes, electrolyzers can be shipped, it can be developed at scale, whatever, but right now, we are nowhere near what we need to have in terms of manufacturing capacity all over the world, not just in Europe or elsewhere, to deliver on the 2030 existing projects, those who were announced. That's an issue. And once again, China is leading. So for Europe, once again, that's a problem. Then, don't worry, you can get the slides later on if you need. We can circulate them. I'm trying to get to the next bottleneck, but the next bottleneck doesn't want to appear. Don't worry, I'm still pushing on the same button. But that's fine. I can do without this, and I will conclude with this. The third bottleneck is, do we have the ships to take that hydrogen from here to Europe? Do we have the infrastructure to actually build this intercontinental economy? Right now, we don't. Not on the midstream side, but not even on the downstream side. We know that the investment gap is huge, and thank you, McKinsey, for those numbers. We need a lot of billions of dollars. Once again, the known egg eaters problem. We don't have enough ships running on hydrogen. And these ones, they look good, but they're not real. These are the only 4 hydrogen ships we have right now in the world in regular operations. Definitely none of them, not a single one, can bring hydrogen from Chile to Europe at this point. Once again, it's not Chile's fault. It's everybody's fault, so to speak. Finally, ammonia. A lot of people are talking about ammonia. It will not solve all problems. For one simple reason. If you're betting on ammonia, then basically you may be trading our climate crisis for a biodiversity crisis. And this is a key issue we need to address. That's why methanol is picking up. That's why other types of capacities to export hydrogen from one continent to the other are picking up. And that's why, of course, semi-finite products might be an even better way to take that hydrogen, not as a molecule, but as a semi-finite product, say steel, for example, from Chile, say, to Europe. Finally, social acceptance. Hydrogen today is not green. You know that all too well. Only 0.04% in 2021 of the global hydrogen production capacity was renewable. So basically, that's why we hear a lot in Europe these days. Hydrogen is not a solution because you know it's not green today. So as project developer, as a hydrogen company, you need to show that your hydrogen is going to be green as fast as possible. You need to deliver on proof. And if you don't, people will not use your hydrogen. And finally, because we know hydrogen is the problem, then that's why we have strong regulation that is burgeoning all across the world, but especially in Europe, because Europe has the harshest, if you like, or the most advanced, depending on where you stand on the industry cycle, regulation scheme for hydrogen. So basically, in a nutshell, and to conclude, when you look at these 51 countries with strategies for hydrogen all over the world, you realize that many key market success factors are still left unaddressed. Critical metals, electrolyzer supply, lack of talent pool or training programs, the competition for metallurgical engineers, etc., etc. The impact, of course, of climate, the climate impact of hydrogen leaks as well, super important. But there's one thing that I know at this point. Chile has actually pretty interesting projects going on emerging. And by structure, we're going to get to that in the Q&A, I guess. By structure, they align pretty well with the new EU requirements for hydrogen imports, the additionality requirement, the time correlation, the zoning, and finally, you have one of the strongest international hydrogen brandings in the world today. So definitely, congratulations. You're not ready, but you're on a good course. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias a Mico por su exposición y ahora dejo con ustedes a Joan Leal, CEO de EDF Chile. También lo vamos a recibir con un aplauso.
Thank you very much for having us. It's our great pleasure to be here today as EDF. Great conference, and thank you also for being part of this great panel. So look forward to the Q&A that is going to happen very soon. My name is Joan Leal. I'm CEO of EDF Chile. And today, what we're going to do, we're going to spend a few minutes on getting to know EDF for those of you who haven't heard about our group, and then we're going to talk about the vision we have on green hydrogen in Chile and how that is related to our connections with Europe and also other continents. So to get started, EDF is a French power company who, maybe you heard the news a couple of weeks ago, now EDF is 100% owned by the French state. So we're a public company now in Europe who has a vision, a long-term vision to deploy projects overseas, globally, and that includes Chile. That is one of the focus of the group in the Americas region. And EDF has a large track record, experience, capabilities and competences in the power sector across all the value chain. We have 170,000 people working for the company. All of them are moved for the purpose of the company. The purpose of EDF is to build a net zero energy future with the primary focus on saving the planet, driving well-being, and importantly, to push economic development all over the world. And for those who work in the company like me, that's our driver, and that's what we do every day. And again, with our international strategy, and I'm trying to move this, we think that this is possible in France, in Europe, but also globally. So our commitment is to create this net zero energy future, and how we do it, and I'm going to show you some of the metrics of our company. So EDF is the world's leading producer of net zero electricity. We can say that 91% of the installed capacity of EDF is carbon-free electricity generation, mostly driven by nuclear power. That was the technology that the company has been deploying for many decades in France and now in Europe. But also we have quite a large experience in hydropower and also renewable generation. But with those three technologies, renewable generation, hydropower, and nuclear, we can say that more than 90% of the electricity we produce globally, it's carbon-free. In terms of renewable generation, it's been the focus of the company over the last decade. At the moment, we are one of the leaders in Europe in terms of generation of renewable, being the drivers for this generation, hydropower, wind. We have more than almost 10 gigawatts of wind capacity installed in Europe, and also solar. And the focus of the company, as part of the pillars that we're going to see later, is to increase that total capacity we have today from 30 gigawatts to 60 gigawatts of renewable generation by 2030. So how are we doing this? And we have defined three pillars at EDF that are very well aligned with the CAP 2030 alignments and objectives. So number one, we focus on our clients through the services we provided, and we want to build creators of services and solutions to support all our customers all over the world. Second pillar is to become a global leader in the generation of CO2 neutral electricity. And again, as part of that, we're pushing very hard on hydropower, as well as nuclear. As you probably heard, that Europe is going to increase nuclear capacity in the next decade, so EDF is also focusing on that. And obviously renewable generation, that is one of the drivers, not only in Europe, but also in the Americas and Chile. And the third pillar is to become a key international player, helping all the world with the energy transition. In that regard, Chile, it has become one of the focus of the organization, EDF, due to the advancement of the country in terms of the regulatory framework, the energy transition policies, the public-private cooperation to develop projects across the sectors. So those are the three pillars that we've been pursuing to become to get to the net zero future. On top of the pillars, we have defined specific plans to get to that objective. The first plan is electromobility. We do believe in the electrification of the world. We've been pushing very hard on electrifying the transportation system. Second one is energy storage, that, as you might know, is now in the center of the discussion in this country. But globally, we believe that it's the only way to make the energy transition a reality. And so we have a plan to deploy energy storage, short duration, long duration, not only in Chile, but globally. The third plan is solar. We still believe that solar PV is a technology that needs to be deployed. Chile is one of the examples, but we also need energy storage to make the economics work for solar PV developments. The fourth plan we have launched, it's on the nuclear sector. As you know, France is pushing very hard to continue building new reactors with new technologies that have been developed by EDF. And I think that at the moment, nuclear power in Europe has been very supportive, especially considering the energy crisis that we've been having over the last 2 years due to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And finally, and one of the reasons we are here, we also have a hydrogen plan. And the hydrogen plan we have, it's looking for the decarbonization of the planet. We have ambitious targets. Our plan implies to build by 2030 at least 3 gigawatts of electrolyzers globally. And the center of the attention for us is Chile, basically due to the favorable conditions to develop green hydrogen projects. So going back to Chile, we, EDF, have been here in Chile for more than 10 years, working across different technologies with different projects through different companies. And the focus has always been renewable generation, power generation, but now we see that there is a big opportunity for green hydrogen. And we're trying to collaborate to the EDF green hydrogen plan, and again, due to the opportunities to develop giga-scale projects here, we can contribute to that significantly. In the previous presentation, you already saw the potential of this country in renewable generation that is key for the development and the competitiveness of green hydrogen. We have the best solar resources in the north, you know it very well, and we have the best wind resources of the planet in the region of Magallanes. So that is driving us to be a very competitive country. McKinsey has done a lot of studies on that and is putting a lot of pressure on us to get to the $1 per kilogram. I hope we can make it someday, but the fact of the matter is that we, EDF, want to focus on hydrogen development. At the moment, we are taking a relevant position in the south of Chile, in Magallanes, where we are developing 2 large-scale projects. But there is another focus that it's in some way related to green hydrogen, and is also one of the focus of EDF in Chile, is to be a player in energy storage. We think that energy storage for the electrical system that we have today is an urgent need. Short duration through batteries, but also long duration energy storage with innovative technologies that are going to facilitate the energy transition. And so we're pushing very hard with projects, assets, and opportunities on this sector, energy storage. as well as transmission. We're not a transmission company, however, we are very supportive to all the developments on transmission. We're analyzing different technologies to support transmission that we believe that for the current status of the electrical system, it's going to be key for the energy transition. So in Chile, we're focusing in these two pillars, energy storage and transmission and green hydrogen. Regarding the contribution of Chile for the EDF hydrogen plan, we think that we see a lot of opportunities. When we talk about what is the Chilean plan of hydrogen, we get to very impressive numbers, at least the plan that we have up to now. It might change very soon, but in the hydrogen plan of Chile, we have an estimation by 2030 of 25 gigawatts of electrolyzers, which is a significant amount. If we compare that with our current electrical system, that is about 30 gigawatts, it's a very impressive number, and that's only for 2030. And then if we compare that with what Europe has been planning through the different plans, individually as a country, but also as a European Union, the plan by 2030 is 40 gigawatts in total for the whole European community. France, it's planning by 2030 to have deploy 6.5 gigawatts of electrolyzers. And we, EDF, want to take a position to contribute to our 3 gigawatts globally, but for Chile, at least to contribute with more than 1 gigawatt of electrolyzers. And that's what is being the focus of our group locally in Chile. And so EDF has developed over the last years expertise in the hydrogen field, both to produce hydrogen, but also as a user. We've been taking a big position in the sector through different institutions. EDF is part of the IFER, the European Institute for Energy Research, in where we have an active participation to do research and development, to push for pilot opportunities in hydrogen. We also have a subsidiary of the group that is Hynamics, that is fully focused in green hydrogen projects all over the world, all the way from engineering services, construction, O&M, and others. And we also participate in McPhee to manufacture electrolyzers and other components for the industry. So we're taking a big position and gaining experience and capabilities to support the industry. And as I said in the beginning, in all the value chain. And I think that that's one of the focus of EDF, is to develop, build, and operate this project across the value chain. So all the way from renewable generation, wind, solar, and others, and then going through the hydrogen production, and then going then to the derivatives that at the moment we're focusing primarily in green ammonia, but also we're looking at other derivatives such as e-methanol and e-fuels. And then to put the derivatives and the products near to the clients or final users. So that means to export the derivatives to Europe or Asia. And so we do have the capabilities to add value in all the value chain and take a big position in this industry. And that's what we're doing here in Chile with the developments that at the moment we have in the region of Magallanes. So thank you for your time and look forward to the Q&A and the panel section. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias a Joan por esta presentación y ahora damos paso entonces para la exposición de Alejandro Buvinic, jefe de la División de Servicios, Inversiones y Economía Digital de la Subsecretaría de Relaciones Económicas Internacionales. Le damos un aplauso.
Good afternoon. Just that word will be in English. Voy a hablar en español. Voy a hacer la excepción, parece la regla. Así para aquellos que tienen que usar audífonos, mis disculpas. So sorry for those that I had to have translation. I will do it in Spanish. Igual es difícil estar en el cuarto lugar después de escuchar a la academia, escuchar al sector privado, a los centros de estudios, etc. y dar la voz del sector público. Yo creo que vamos a empezar hablando lo que es lo más importante que no nos tenemos que olvidar. Que acá hay un compromiso que se ha asumido y ha sido transversal en cuanto a tintes políticos, que es que Chile sea carbono neutral y sea resiliente para el 2050. Es un compromiso que lo hemos asumido a nivel internacional en el Acuerdo de París, y no solamente así, sino que también lo hemos asumido a nivel interno a través de la Ley Marco del Cambio Climático. Por lo tanto, no hay que olvidarse que lo que estamos buscando es mejorar la vida de todos los ciudadanos contra el cambio climático, que son algo que estamos viendo cada uno de nosotros en nuestro diario vivir. Y obviamente aquí cuando hablamos de las características para poder, en definitiva, ser un país, yo creo que ya todos lo han dicho, la importancia y los beneficios que tiene Chile en el mundo, en que no solamente tiene la capacidad solar, sino que tiene los vientos, y no son los vientos costeros, sino que los vientos internos. Yo vengo de Magallanes, así que conozco muy bien cómo son los vientos en mi tierra. Así que las características naturales son importantes, las tenemos, y ¿qué hay que hacer además? Y ese es el punto, ¿qué es lo que tenemos que hacer? Hay un número que lo voy a después nuevamente hablar, que es el 70% de producción que tengamos va a tener que ser para exportación porque no tenemos capacidad. Aunque pongamos todos los autos, los buses, todas las casas en sistema eléctrico, nuestra capacidad que vamos a tener, ojalá instalada, no va a quedar un excedente de al menos un 70%. Por lo tanto, nuestra visión, que no solamente está en el mundo de la energía, sino que ha estado en el mundo del comercio exterior, es mirar hacia afuera. Es la única forma que podemos mantener el desarrollo económico de nuestro país. Aquí está, este era. Ahora, y muy bien dijiste tú, Mico, de las estrategias. Y muchas veces puedes tener estas leyes que son estratégicas en materia del hidrógeno verde, pero acá lo importante es cómo tú las vas implementando en la realidad cuando tú implementas este tipo de estrategia. No sacamos nada de ser portaliano y tener ley cuando realmente la voluntad política no está. Y eso es lo que hemos tratado de demostrar. Y acá lo que estamos haciendo es una política orientada con la misión. ¿Qué es lo que queremos hacer? Uno de los temas es cómo podemos trabajar todas las distintas agencias o ministerios de manera coordinada y no sea una política de estanco de silos que suele suceder en el mundo de los gobiernos. Para eso, ¿qué hacemos con esta misión? Ver cuáles son las trabas regulatorias, para dar certidumbre al sector privado y poder resolver esas trabas regulatorias, especialmente en materia de infraestructura, que alguien puso en un slide, para poder captar la inversión extranjera tan necesaria. El otro igual es el uso del equilibrio de los recursos. Y acá estamos hablando no solamente que tenemos que tener cuidado, sino que tenemos que tener una protección al medio ambiente, porque estamos buscando luchar contra el tema del cambio climático, pero no podemos estar haciendo un desastre en el mundo ambiental. Y además tenemos que tener el cuidado con los ciudadanos. Yo creo que es importante igual, y eso es una de las cosas que pasa en Magallanes, que igual tenemos que ver cuál es el impacto que pueda tener en la comunidad proyectos de esta envergadura, en que tenemos que tener la capacidad urbanística, de estudios, de colegios, etcétera, que lleva este tipo de megaproyectos. Por eso es importante que haya ese uso equilibrado. Ahora, como dije, nuestra idea es tener una economía de exportación limpia. Y eso es algo que nos puede ayudar mucho en el desarrollo del hidrógeno verde en nuestro país. Obviamente que una de las cosas es que también tenemos que pensar, y esto es importante, es para tratar de evitar el centralismo. Y aquí es cómo nosotros incorporamos a la comunidad local, cómo conversamos con la comunidad local. Y acá es, ¿por qué? Porque van a haber muchas externalidades cuando hablamos de las cadenas globales de valor, es cómo van a impactar en la misma comunidad. Por eso hay que hacerlas partícipes de este proceso. Y por último, esta apertura internacional, que es lo que más que nada estamos haciendo en el mundo y no quedarnos solamente a nivel de nosotros. Ahora sí, eso. Como dije, este objetivo es buscar acciones concretas para el desarrollo de la industria, pero este proceso de coordinación va acompañado de consejos consultivos, con expertos, los distintos ministerios. Es más, la inauguración de este evento fue una clara demostración donde tuvimos los ministros más importantes de las distintas carteras que son importantes para el hidrógeno verde, donde existe ese compromiso. Pero además es esta consulta pública, y yo creo que es importante eso, también de saber que las personas puedan opinar sobre este proceso. Y fue interesante por los números que tenemos hoy día de inscritos a nivel de consulta pública. Tenemos más de 1000 personas en Santiago, 211 en Valparaíso, 205 en en Magallanes, 186 Biobío y 121 en Antofagasta. Que si lo ven en proporción al número de habitantes por región, es bastante grande la que tiene Magallanes o Antofagasta o el Biobío. Por lo tanto, aquí es cómo podemos hacer una cosa copartícipe para que todos trabajemos en el mismo fin, que es, en este caso, el desarrollo económico de nuestras regiones. Acá vamos a la cadena de valor del hidrógeno verde. Y obviamente yo creo que muchos de los técnicos acá han hablado mucho de esto. Es la producción de la energía, ¿cómo la vamos a hacer? Primero es eólica, solar, y cómo esa energía nos va a ayudar a desarrollar este hidrógeno verde. El modo de producción, ahí se lo dejo a los técnicos, los electrolisis o los otros que tú mismo decías, Mac, que podían haber. Pero acá lo importante es después cómo vamos a implementar esto a través de qué. Transporte, almacenamiento, que hoy día no vamos a hablar de la transición eléctrica, sino que vamos a hablar de hidrógeno, pero el almacenamiento va a pasar a ser un tema crucial en el desarrollo de la energía sustentable en Chile. Pero después igual es ver, y esto es cuando uno ve con visión de futuro, ¿qué otro tipo de industrias requieren de energía para desarrollarse? Que sean en un gran porcentaje. Si voy a tener hidrógeno verde, que da sustentable en Chile, en Magallanes, y puedo de repente ver qué otro tipo de industria podría instalarse paralela a la de hidrógeno verde, donde va a tener unos elementos bastante interesantes, que es el costo más bajo que va a tener en la vida para producir ese tipo de productos o servicios. Entonces, esto no solamente tenemos que pensarlo como una mirada estratégica del hidrógeno, sino que también tenemos que ver cómo esta estrategia del hidrógeno puede ampliarse a otro tipo de industrialización en el país, especialmente en la zona donde tengamos el hidrógeno, como es en el caso de Antofagasta y Magallanes. Y obviamente lo más importante es cuando queremos exportar, ver el tema del almacenamiento, del transporte y especialmente donde llegamos con el hidrógeno verde. Y acá, como podemos ver acá, ¿cómo podemos hacer esta cosa de mayor valor a nivel local? Y nuevamente aquí volvemos al punto, y acá voy a poner un ejemplo paralelo. Cuando nosotros desarrollamos el hidrógeno verde, vamos a tener que desarrollar muchos servicios, especialmente para el hidrógeno verde, ingeniería, técnicos. Yo creo que ayer ya hablaron harto del tema de los skills, que son importantísimos, desarrollar institutos, universidades con nuevas carreras que vengan a apoyar este sector. Pero una vez que tengamos maduro este sector, esos servicios o productos vamos a poder sacarlos como productos de exportación. ¿Qué es lo que nos pasa hoy día en la minería? Hemos desarrollado todo un sector de servicios de apoyo a la minería gracias a todo el tema del minero del cobre. Y hoy día somos exportadores de servicios en muchos países de Latinoamérica. Eso es lo que nosotros tenemos que pensar hacia el futuro. No solamente tener esa energía renovable, de bajo costo, sino que además crear otro tipo de industrias paralelas en la región y pensar que ese mismo mundo de proveedores de servicios, pues las agencias respectivas podrán llevarlos hacia el mundo, porque ya vimos que esto está en todas partes desarrollándose. Entonces después nosotros vamos a poder ser proveedores de servicios, exportación de servicios en materia del hidrógeno verde. Y eso es un elemento que tenemos que tenerlo dentro de la estrategia, que es importante. No solamente mirar el foco específico, sino que verlo de una manera más amplia. Ahora, me han dicho que tenía que hablar de la Unión Europea. Y bueno, en materia de la Unión Europea, permiso. Uno de los temas que fuimos cuando empezamos con esta estrategia fue salir a conversar con nuestros socios comerciales. En el Asia, hicimos memorando de entendimiento con Corea, con Singapur, Japón, pero especialmente con Europa. Hemos tenido MOU con Francia, bueno, UK, Alemania, etc. Pero también hicimos convenios con puertos europeos, que son importantes cuando alguien decía, bueno, ¿cómo vamos a hacer el tránsito? Si yo no tengo hecho lo que es la infraestructura del transporte y el almacenamiento, difícilmente voy a poder exportar mi producto. Y pensemos que el 70% tenemos que exportarlo. De ahí que hemos tenido estos MOU que suscribimos con el puerto de Amberes, el Hamburgo, e incluso hemos ido renovándolos. El de Rotterdam lo acabamos de renovar este año fue, porque era el 21 y lo renovamos el 23. Y es para poder crear este tema de cómo yo voy a capacitar, transferir tecnología, ver cuáles son las necesidades y cómo debo producir para poder llegar en definitiva al mercado destino europeo. Igual hemos estado viendo y ya tenemos un crédito del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo por $400 millones para desarrollo de productos en el mundo del hidrógeno verde. Pero lo más importante yo creo que fue el anuncio que se hizo con la llegada de la presidenta de la Comisión Europea del team del desarrollo del proyecto Team Europe para el desarrollo del hidrógeno verde en Chile. Esto fue un anuncio que fue hace un par de semanas atrás, cuando estuvo la presidenta en visita oficial a Chile, en que además no solamente se habló de crear este team, sino que este team tenga dinero. Porque la verdad las cosas, nuevamente, esta retórica, si no hay financiamiento, de poco queda. Y este proyecto viene acompañado de 4 millones de euros, que además está adicionados por otros 4 millones de euros apoyados por Alemania. Pero además del Team Europe, tenemos un fondo Team Europe, que es para el hidrógeno verde, para el hidrógeno renovable en Chile, de la cual va a haber más fondos disponibles para proyectos específicos. Y esto viene del Banco de Inversiones Europea y el Banco de Desarrollo de Alemania. Por lo tanto, ahí vemos que ya hay cosas específicas, cuando pueden haber proyectos presentados. Este último va a estar manejado con la misión de la Unión Europea en Chile en conjunto con la Corfo. Entonces, ¿cuáles son los próximos pasos a seguir? Bueno, nosotros en el acuerdo actual tenemos un comité de energía. Incluso hace un par de semanas me tocó estar en el comité de energía y uno de los temas que más nos tocaba discutir es, bueno, Europa tiene sus estándares para entender que este hidrógeno sea sustentable. Y nosotros, para poder llegar después a vender este hidrógeno que sea sustentable, tenemos que cumplir con esos estándares. Y nosotros tenemos que desarrollar las regulaciones nacionales. Entonces, ahí viene este tipo de relación con la Unión Europea y otros países de Europa en poder tener capacitación de relación entre ellos y nosotros para poder sacar la normativa que sea pertinente para la exportación. Por lo tanto, eso es algo que estamos trabajando. En el segundo semestre vamos a ir nuevamente ahora nosotros vamos a Europa a tener la reunión en este comité del acuerdo que está actualmente vigente. Pero como todos habrán escuchado en las noticias, nosotros el acuerdo con la Unión Europea lo modernizamos, cerramos la negociación hace un par de meses, en la cual se incorporó un nuevo capítulo de modernización que habla de energías y materias primas. Y en este capítulo en específico se refería más que nada al hidrógeno verde, pero para no hablar exclusivamente de hidrógeno verde, lo ampliamos a un concepto genérico de materias primas, donde ahí vamos a tener un trabajo conjunto en este específico tema que está en el marco del acuerdo de modernización con la Unión Europea, que esperamos firmarlo a fin de año y pueda estar vigente lo antes posible. Por lo tanto, hoy día tenemos los canales de conversación, tenemos los canales de comunicación con los países europeos, no solamente con la Unión Europea, también con los países miembros de EFTA, así que veo que hay un stand de Suiza, así no voy a decir que solamente sea la UE, pero también con países individuales que estamos trabajando muy cercanamente. Con Francia vamos a tener un acuerdo, igual un MOU con Francia, en la cual esperamos prontamente suscribirlo. Y la idea es poder tener creación de capacidades, estar preparados en esta estrategia que es una estrategia global, no solamente específica. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Alejandro. Le he dicho que se siente y ahí están subiendo entonces el resto de los integrantes de este panel para una breve conversación que será moderado por Clemens. Eso es.
Muy bien, muchas gracias por las presentaciones. Thanks a lot. I learned a lot. Very interesting, really. Above all, I heard a lot of motivation, and you can also see that here. There's so much interest. It's fantastic to see. And with the first round of questions, I wanted to start there, the opportunity, the positive side for Chile. Let's start maybe with the perspective from the private sector. Joan, you talked about the strong purpose, which I loved. You talked about how EDF wants to bring that also to other regions and also to Chile. Well, the focus that you said, Chile is focus, part of countries that EDF is focusing on. Why is that? What do you see from a private sector perspective as the opportunities of Chile?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a very good question. So Mikaa can address that better than me because he had a full analysis on Chile. And I fully agree with you. We're not prepared now. But we will be very soon. And I think that that's a shared view that we have as EDF for this country. So number one, and the logical answer is resources in terms of renewable generation, which is not new for us. Everyone in this room knows Atacama Desert and Magallanes, and there is a lot of sun in the north and wind in the south. So that brings, under the purely economic analysis, a competitive advantage to then have a low-cost energy production, 100% renewables, and then that gives us the opportunity to be very competitive on the rest of the value chain. But that's just a single part of the equation. So the first reason is the resources we have available in this country. Second, even though the regulatory framework for hydrogen is still not ready, Chile has a history in the electrical sector that has proved that it's possible to regulate the sector with different models. And we do have in the power sector a regulatory framework that works. We're in a moment in the country that needs to be improved. We know that. However, we have a basis and a history on regulation for the power sector that is quite successful. And then it could be replicated for the hydrogen, and we've seen all the efforts from the regulator to make that happen. So good resources, regulatory framework, not there, but it's coming, and we have a basis to believe that that's going to happen within the next few years. Then, which is even more important, there is a national strategy on how to not only develop projects and define targets, but it's now going to the regions, and the regions, for example, Magallanes and Antofagasta are defining their own plans, and they are putting a lot of efforts and coordination to make these projects work. Particularly in the region of Magallanes, we've seen there is appetite, intentions, and formal programs to coordinate the different actors and the different players to promote not only projects, but also the industry completely, creating first social value within the regions, and then facilitating everything for the groups that are pursuing projects to make the projects viable. And that coordination at the regional levels in Chile, we've been seeing that more oftenly. In that particular region, it's probably more strong. There is a public-private collaboration through the regional government and the authorities and all the stakeholders, including the academia, to create this environment in where the projects and the industry can be viable. So there are many factors that are and good signs from different stakeholders that are telling us that Chile is a good candidate to promote this industry and be pioneer for the future and the decarbonization of the country and the planet.
Fantastic. That's beautiful to hear. Thanks a lot, Joan. Let's maybe jump to Alejandro. You also talked about the opportunities, of course, especially from a regional perspective. Now, you are having these dialogues at international level with European Union, for example. What do you see are the opportunities that really work in these dialogues? And how do these dialogues help to unlock the opportunity for Chile?
Gracias. Yo creo que me olvidé decir un tema de la estrategia, si me permites. que igual nuestra estrategia en materia del hidrógeno verde sustentable está igual basada en el género. Tenemos una dimensión del tema de mujeres que estamos tratando de desarrollar mucho. Por eso dentro puse el punto, el 33% de estas consultas fueron mujeres. Espero que para el próximo panel haya alguna representación como speaker. Y es importante igual resaltar eso porque es parte de la inclusión. Y uno de los temas que acabamos de tener es un estudio que hizo la OCDE sobre inversiones sustentables en Chile, que es un nuevo concepto que se está hablando de los FDI Qualities. Y claro, dentro de esos elementos estaba cómo podemos primero tener el tema de la creación de capacidad, especialmente en skill, que es muy importante. Es un problema que no solamente se nos presenta para el tema del hidrógeno verde, sino que para muchos sectores de la economía. Cuando tratamos de traer megaproyectos de minería, también el problema se presenta en que no tenemos la capacidad humana para hacer frente y tenemos que traer gente de afuera para poder hacerlo. Entonces, el hecho de poder, y una de las recomendaciones es cómo podemos tratar de desarrollar institutos y universidades con carreras adecuadas a los nuevos tiempos. En esto igual tiene mucho que ver esta relación internacional que tenemos con los países, especialmente los europeos. Porque todos estos MOU, cuando uno ve, se habla de la cooperación, en la creación de capacidad, pero también en el desarrollo de los estándares que tenemos que tener en Chile, que es lo que hoy día nos falta, que son las regulaciones. Y todos sabemos que las regulaciones es lo que puede matar un proyecto de inversión extranjera. Parte de la política de competitividad que estamos sacando es cómo podemos tratar de limitar los permisos, cuántas autorizaciones tiene un proyecto de inversión, cómo tratar de homogeneizar eso, y eso es un poco importante, es cómo incentivamos la inversión extranjera a través de eso, con mucha transparencia. Creo que en ese sentido los acuerdos internacionales están ayudando a traer esa capacidad que se ha desarrollado en otros países y poder tratar de adecuarlas, porque no es replicarlas, porque hay que adecuarlas a la idiosincrasia nuestra, especialmente en materia, yo creo que de skill. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, excelente. Mikko, let's stick with the opportunities. You showed a slide that was underrepresenting LATAM's potential at the global level. So that means that I think you clearly have a good grip on the opportunities here. So can you talk a little bit about the opportunities as well, specifically from a perspective of someone sitting in Europe and looking at us? What does Chile have?
Thank you, Clemens. Two quick things maybe to answer this question because we don't have a lot of time. First thing, what we have to understand now, I should have shown a map of this, but I forgot. The country right now in Latin America and the Caribbean who is the most involved in hydrogen as a new industry is Trinidad and Tobago. It's not Argentina, it's not Brazil, it's not even Chile, it's Trinidad and Tobago. Why? Because they have a whole gas industry that they need to decarbonize as fast as possible. So of course, that is not green hydrogen. Of course, it's so-called blue hydrogen. Well, it's fossil-based hydrogen. But definitely, right now in Latin America, that's where the demand comes from. Then, once I've said that, what is Chile and the whole continent's potential? Well, the potential is huge, but the competition is just as huge. And my job in this panel is to play the devil's advocate here. So definitely, the competition is huge in the Middle East. The competition is huge in North America, in North Africa. The competition is huge in North America as well with Canada. The competition is huge as well in the southern part of Africa with South Africa, Namibia, Angola, Kenya, and so on. So my point is, we can devise all day, talk about LCOEs and LCOHs and so on. So basically talk about this whole thing from a cost-centric point of view. What I would tell you is the countries that will have a premium in the hydrogen economy coming forward are those who are able to basically align from a normative point of view with the main off-takers. And you understood me, I think the main off-takers will be Europeans here. Not Chinese, not US, and so on. So basically, the one country that will develop a regulation or regulatory system that is the most aligned with that of the EU, and on the other side, of course, with that of Japan and South Korea as well, who are going to be, of course, massive off-takers, are going to be the ones leading this race. That's the second element I wanted to mention here. So normative alignment is absolutely key. And that's the job of administrations and politicians. And third element, which is absolutely key, is bringing the technologies in your country to develop more and more in-country value. That's what Egypt is looking at. That's what Saudi Arabia is looking at. That's what Morocco is looking at. And here, the competition is super fierce. Because when we talk about green hydrogen, what we tend to do is talk only about a renewables-based hydrogen competition. But that is misleading quite a lot. And that's what I wanted to emphasize with the mentioning Trinidad and Tobago. The one countries that Chile is going to be competing with the most fiercely are the ones who are oil and gas countries that have no other choice but going into a hydrogen economy that is as strong as possible, as aligned with off-takers as possible to basically survive as an economy, as an industry, or even in the case of Saudi Arabia or others, as a political regime. It's a matter of survival. In those countries, driving forces are huge, and they're not just market-based. They're identity-based, they're political-based, and so on and so forth. They're geopolitical. That is what Chile will have to face as a competition. And I hope that this message comes across pretty clear. These guys, they go big or they go home. So if here in Chile, you're betting on 30 megawatts projects here and 200 megawatts projects there, and even 1.5 gigawatt project in Magallanes, or even just 2 gigawatt project in Antofagasta, what's going to happen is you will not be big enough to lead the change against these guys who are, from the get-go, developing projects of 15 gigawatts in Egypt, 10 gigawatts in Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. That's the real competition here, and that's the real challenge for a country like Chile, if you ask me.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. Couldn't have been more clear. Couldn't be more aligned with you. That's why when we developed the strategy together with the previous government, the target was 25 gigawatts, because either you go big or you won't get anywhere. Absolutely agree. Do we have a time for another quick round of questions? No? Not really, no? Yeah, I know. But it's just getting interesting. So, where's the timekeeper? There's no timekeeper. You do have time? Yeah, they're not kicking us out, so we'll go for another quick round of questions. So we talked about the opportunities, but we should also take some time to talk about the challenges. Let's maybe go in the same order. Joan, you said you have set a target of more than a gigawatt by 2030 just for your company. So are you on a good way? What are the challenges? What needs to happen that actually this 1 gigawatt is producing by 2030?
Yeah, no, many challenges as we've discussed today. As a developer, because in this role, EDF is playing the developer role in this region. For example, in Magallanes, we see many challenges, particularly there. Since we are fully aligned with the EU, we want to go for off-grid projects, 100% renewables, electrolyzers near to the wind farms, and we will follow all the EU recommendations and the standards. And so, but again, that brings several challenges. First, I agree with you, we need to go big. So those are giga-scale projects that we're trying to develop in a region who has a grid of less than 100 megawatts. And we're going to be building, there is a forecast that it could be 15 or 30 gigawatts of wind farms. Again, in a region that it does have industrial experience, but not at this scale. And so that brings different challenges. For example, the permitting path. The permitting in Chile is regulated. I think that and is improving every time. But I think that it's key to define a regulatory framework for the environmental permits who is consistent with the scale of the industry and also aligned with some of the international standards that, for example, Europe, but also Asia, that will be the final off-takers of these projects. And I think that there is a challenge there on how the environmental service is going to face and evaluate these projects that it doesn't have any precedence in Chile. The other challenge, and going back to this region where we're pushing for off-grid, is that there are many big players doing projects, and there is a need of critical infrastructure that it doesn't exist in the region. Roads, export-import facilities, desalination plants, this was discussed in a previous panel today, transmission systems. And based on the experience of this country in other industry, such as the mining industry, that has been very successful in Chile, but they've taken a different approach in terms of how to develop the industry in the critical infrastructure. And so I think that we have an opportunity here to do it right with the government to tackle the critical infrastructure together as an industry. So rather than building 10 export-import facilities, why don't we get all together and coordinate with the public sector and just build 2 big mega-scale ports so that then it can provide services to the industry. And the same with the water access. Why don't we just build 1 desalination plant, or why don't we find other innovative solutions to provide services to the whole industry? And so I think that the critical infrastructure in these remote areas and the way we develop that in agreement with the public sector is going to be key, and it's one of the challenges today to make the industry and those projects happen. And I'll stop there because I can continue, but I know we have only a limited time, and I look forward to hear the rest of the colleagues.
Thanks, Joan. Alejandro, espero que estés tomando apuntes ahí. Ya nos están señalando que tenemos que terminar pronto. 1 minuto desde tu punto de vista en los diálogos quizá con Europa, los desafíos que quedan acá para Chile.
Yo creo que después lo que nos dijo el profesor fue claro que no está mal la estrategia, en que tenemos que buscar el mercado que tiene más demanda, que es el europeo, y que ha buscado un hidrógeno verde por las nuevas directrices que tienen los europeos. Por lo tanto, ahí vamos a tener un plus. Y creo que acá se llama la estrategia lleva una coordinación público-privado. Y creo que eso ha estado demostrado por la forma que hemos trabajado el hidrógeno verde en los últimos años, y que se ha trascendido los gobiernos que hay en el país, que eso es importante igual, como también dar para que además nuestros inversionistas extranjeros puedan venir con la certeza de poder invertir, porque en infraestructura vamos a tener que tener inversión. Carla Flores lo tiene muy claro, y el ministro de Energía le dijimos cómo tratar de buscar unificar inversiones en infraestructura que sea para más de un proyecto, y no hacer un hoyo para hacer la fibra óptica, otro hoyo que es para hacer otro tipo de elementos. Creo que la unificación de proyectos en infraestructura va a ser importante para nosotros, y en eso se está trabajando seriamente.
Thanks a lot. Miko, last question. You already talked a bit about the challenges, and above all, you talked about the fierce competition. What does Chile have to do to compete at that level?
Listen to its scientists. What I mean by that is there's a lot of research going on that has been published in Chile by Chilean scientists on the Chilean potential for hydrogen and how to resolve this gap between investments that are needed, the strategy, and the demand that is not there. There's one thing though that I want to stress, and that is definitely 2 things I want to stress, sorry, and that is absolutely common to all the 51 national hydrogen strategies or action plans I've mentioned. None absolutely none of these 51 strategies has an educational component that is strong enough to actually meet with the very ambitious targets for hydrogen production or hydrogen economy development for 2030. I'm not talking about 2050 or something, for 2030, in 7 years' time. So here, you guys need to produce hydrogen professors, hydrogen researchers, hydrogen PhDs, and of course, go down the food chain, master's degrees and bachelors and so on. This is absolutely key, not just for project developers, but for the whole value chain. And in that front, don't worry, absolutely no country, once again, actually meets the targets on the educational aspect. And then the second thing I wanted to stress here is the impact of inclusiveness. My colleague was talking about the gender aspect. I know that some people may think it's like a gadget thing. It is not. What we see in America, what we see in Europe at this point, is this kind of petro-nostalgia movement that is emerging. Some colleagues have called it petro-masculinity. It's basically a movement that basically says that, hey, you know, it wasn't that bad, that CO2 emissions activities, you know, like having big cars, having barbecues and so on, it wasn't that bad. Why should we relinquish that by transitioning to greener energies? And the reason why I'm mentioning this is in the public space in Europe or in America, these people are gaining a lot of ground. And by gaining a lot of ground, they're basically hindering, limiting, pulling the brake globally on this energy transition. So here, these movements in Chile might also come. I haven't studied. I don't know if they're coming around or not. But in our part of the world, they are. And they are definitely having a strong impact on these energy transition all over the world, regardless of the technology, whether we talk about hydrogen, batteries, whatever. So be aware of petro-masculinity, and to do that, include women, train women, bring them into green hydrogen. It's absolutely key, absolutely huge as a point. And once again, just to end up with, since I have the mic, thank you to the translators over there who are actually bridging communities and helping us talk to each other. This is definitely inclusiveness, concretely speaking. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. So next time we will do this in French, right, to be really inclusive. Thanks so much for accompanying me on this panel. It has been a real pleasure. Alejandro, Mikaa, Joan, we could go on for quite some time, but now they are kicking us out. They asked me to do a synthesis. I don't think we have really time for a synthesis. I'll borrow your words, Mikaa, and I'll just say, let's go big.
Muchísimas gracias también a Clemens por la moderación de este panel, a ustedes por acompañarnos. Solo en unos minutos más, a las 16:30 horas, vamos a dar paso al último panel de esta jornada, titulado Hidrógeno Verde, Realidad Latinoamericana, Europa y Resto del Mundo. Les esperamos a las 16:30 horas en punto.